Okay, so think about navigating before we had smartphones.
Yeah.
You know, like trying to fold one of those huge paper maps and like figure out which way was north.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like it's from a totally different world now, doesn't it?
Totally different.
And you know what's been the big thing that's changed how we get around?
Well, I mean, for most people, it's got to be Google Maps, right?
Exactly, Google Maps.
Yeah.
And that's what this deep dive is all about.
Okay.
The inner workings of how this thing that like literally billions of people use every day actually works.
It really is incredible when you think about it.
Yeah, we're talking about a planet that has been mapped out in crazy detail.
Yeah, billions of images.
Billions of images, millions of miles across over 100 countries.
Uh-huh.
And it's the top navigation app out there with over 2 billion users each month.
Wow.
It's just huge.
It is.
So what we want to do in this deep dive is kind of pull back the curtain
Yeah.
and really understand the machinery behind Google Maps. You know, how does it actually collect and constantly update all of this information?
Like, where does it even come from?
Yeah, and how has it evolved over the past 2 decades?
Yeah.
Because it's been around for a while now.
It has.
And another big thing is, how is artificial intelligence, or AI, changing the game for Google Maps?
Oh, yeah. AI is playing a huge role.
Absolutely. And we also want to get into the massive scale of this operation.
Right.
And all the different sources that they tap into to build this thing.
Yeah, because they're not just driving around taking pictures.
No, they're getting information from everywhere.
Yeah. Like, they've got their Street View cars, of course.
Yeah.
But also, they use a ton of satellite imagery and aerial photos.
Right.
And then they get data from over 1,000 different third-party providers.
Wow.
Local governments, too.
Oh, yeah.
And then, probably the most important part is the real-time updates that we as users contribute every single day.
Yeah, like when you report an accident or something.
Exactly.
It's pretty amazing.
It really is.
And it's crazy to think that this all started 20 years ago now.
20 years.
Back in 2004.
Wow.
And it literally started with Google co-founder Larry Page.
Oh, wow.
Like basically messing around with a video camera strapped to a car driving around Palo Alto.
Really?
You know, just kind of like, what can we do with this kind of thing?
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty humble beginning for what it is today.
Absolutely.
So let's rewind back to that first spark.
Okay.
And trace how that idea turned into the Google Maps that we all know and love today.
Yeah, let's do it.
So that very first Street View camera system,
Okay.
get this, it weighed 500 pounds.
500 pounds. Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Like you would need some serious equipment just to move that thing around.
That's crazy.
That's wild.
Yeah, you can really tell how ambitious this project was right from the start.
Yeah, and the huge engineering challenge they were taking on.
Absolutely.
But then just 4 years later, in 2008,
Okay.
they had managed to shrink that down to a 75-pound system with 9 cameras.
Okay, that's still pretty heavy.
Still pretty heavy.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They started mounting these systems on snowmobiles and even tricycles.
With tricycles.
Tricycles.
I love that.
And it wasn't just about making them lighter.
Oh.
It was about being able to get into places cars couldn't go.
Oh, I see.
Like those pedestrian zones you see a lot in European cities.
Right.
You know, where cars aren't allowed.
Yeah.
So it was a really clever way to expand their mapping efforts early on.
It's like they were thinking outside the box right from the beginning.
Totally. And then by 2010, they had the spherical camera system.
Spherical?
Yeah, it was a sphere
Wow.
with 15 lenses packed into it.
15 lenses.
And this thing weighed about 50 pounds.
Okay.
So it was light enough for backpackers to carry it.
Okay.
Divers could use it underwater.
No way.
And they even put it on camels.
Camels.
I know, right?
That is so cool.
So they could map places like the Grand Canyon
Wow.
or Machu Picchu.
Like places that are really hard to get to.
Exactly. It was all about getting those unique perspectives.
It just shows how committed they were to capturing the whole world in all its different forms.
And they just kept refining the technology.
Uh-huh.
By 2018, they had this 40-pound wearable system.
40 pounds, so like a small child.
Yeah, someone who actually used it said it was like carrying a small child on your back.
Oh, wow.
You know, walking through trails and stuff like that.
That's pretty amazing.
It's pretty intense.
It is.
But it just shows this constant drive to make the tech more adaptable.
Right.
So they could collect data in all sorts of different environments.
Makes sense.
And that brings us to the latest generation camera,
Yeah.
which came out in 2022.
Uh-huh.
And this one's a big deal.
Why is that?
It's way lighter than the older ones.
Okay.
And more importantly, it's not stuck to a specific Google car anymore.
Oh, I see. So they can just put it on any car.
Exactly. They can just rent a normal car and attach it.
That's super smart.
Yeah, it makes things so much easier.
Yeah. Especially for places where they might not want to send a whole fleet of Google cars.
Right?
Like, what about a place like Hawaii with all those islands?
Exactly.
That would be so much easier with a smaller camera system.
For sure. And when they're not using these cameras, they're all stored and maintained at this place called the Street View Garage.
The Street View Garage?
Yeah, it's right in Palo Alto.
Okay.
And it's not just a garage. It's like a whole specialized center where they repair, build, and maintain all these complex camera systems.
Wow, that's got to be pretty high tech.
Oh, yeah. And get this, there are only 3 of these Street View garages in the entire world.
3.
One in the Asia-Pacific region,
Okay.
one in Europe, and then this one in Palo Alto.
Wow, so they're pretty rare.
Very rare, which shows you how specialized this equipment is.
Yeah, and the expertise they need to keep everything running smoothly.
For sure. And then there's another place called the Street View Service Center.
The Street View Service Center.
This is where all the cameras end up after being out in the field. They get checked, cleaned, and calibrated to make sure they're still working perfectly.
Right.
Especially after being in some crazy conditions.
Oh, yeah, like deserts and stuff.
Yeah, or like super hot and humid places.
Makes sense.
There was even one camera that went all the way to Australia.
Wow, that's a long way to go.
Yeah, so you can see it's a pretty intense process.
It is.
Just to make sure that the data these cameras collect is always top-notch.
Absolutely.
But, okay, so they're constantly gathering all of this visual information, but how do they actually keep the map itself accurate and up-to-date?
Right, because the world is changing all the time.
Exactly, and it's not like just fixing a few typos here and there.
No way!
We're talking about huge changes happening all the time.
Right, like new buildings, roads, businesses closing down, all kinds of things.
Exactly, and get this, they make 100 million updates to the map every single day.
100 million. That's mind-blowing.
It's insane.
It really is.
It's like they're constantly redrawing the digital landscape.
Yeah, that must take some serious computing power and really smart algorithms.
Oh, absolutely, to handle that amount of data. And they've had to shift away from doing most of it manually.
Yeah.
Now it's much more automated.
I see.
They're using something called the Internet of Things, or IoT.
IoT.
Which is basically everyday objects and devices that have sensors and are connected to the internet.
Okay, so like smart appliances and stuff.
Exactly, and all of these devices are constantly feeding information into the map.
So it's not just the Street View cars doing all the work anymore.
None at all. They're still driving around and uploading new images at those hubs we talked about.
Right.
But they're also getting a ton of help from us, the users.
Oh, yeah, crowdsourcing.
Exactly. We're talking about over 500 million people every day contributing updates.
Wow.
Things like leaving reviews, updating business hours,
Okay.
reporting road closures, accidents, that kind of stuff.
So it's like a massive team effort.
Yeah. But how do they make sure all that user-generated data is actually accurate?
That's a good question, because anyone can just go in and add stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, they have these really sophisticated algorithms and moderation techniques to filter and validate all of those user contributions. They're looking for patterns and making sure multiple people are reporting the same thing.
So it's not just one person saying something and then it gets added to the map.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And they also use what's called passive data from users.
Passive data, what's that?
It's stuff like your anonymized speed and drive times.
Oh, okay.
And they use that to predict traffic congestion.
So that's how it knows when my usual route is suddenly jammed.
Exactly.
Pretty impressive.
It's like having a sixth sense for traffic.
Yeah, it really is.
And speaking of things that seem like magic, AI is becoming a huge part of Google Maps too.
Okay, let's talk about that.
All right, so one of the coolest examples is something called Immersive View.
Immersive View.
Yeah, they describe it as like a supercharged version of Street View.
Oh, wow.
And it uses this AI technique called neural radiance fields, or NeurFs.
They're offs.
Yeah, it's basically how AI learns the 3D structure and appearance of a scene just from regular 2D images.
So it's like building a 3D model from a bunch of photos?
Exactly. And it's not just stitching photos together, it's creating a whole new 3D representation.
So it's not like a slideshow or anything?
No, it's a seamless 3D experience that feels super realistic.
Wow.
And they use billions of Street View and aerial images to do this.
Billions.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of data they're processing.
So it's like you can actually experience a place before you even go there.
Exactly. You get a real sense of what it's like to be there.
It's pretty awesome.
And it's not just visuals either. They're adding in real-time information too.
Like what?
Stuff like whether a business is busy right now, what the weather's like, and even air quality data.
That's super helpful.
It really is, especially if you're planning a trip or something.
Absolutely.
And then they've got Gemini.
Gemini?
Yeah, it's their generative AI chatbot.
Okay, I've heard of that.
And they're integrating it into maps in some really cool ways.
Like what?
So imagine you could just ask Google Maps, hey, find me a dog-friendly brewery that's showing the football game on Sunday.
Wow.
And it actually gives you personalized recommendations.
So it's not just a basic keyword search anymore.
No, it's understanding what you're asking in a much deeper way.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
Like having a personal assistant for exploring the world.
And it has to sift through so much information to do that.
It does. It's looking at tons of data in real time.
That's crazy.
And another thing Gemini could do is summarize all those user reviews you see for a place.
Oh, yeah, those can be overwhelming sometimes.
Exactly. It'll give you the key points without you having to read through hundreds of comments.
That would save me so much time.
Right.
I'd love that.
And Gemini's also being integrated into Waze.
Waze.
You know, the navigation app that Google bought a while back.
Yeah.
And they're using it for voice-activated reporting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so you can report hazards, traffic jams, or ask for alternate routes, all with your voice.
So you don't even have to touch your phone.
Exactly. It's way safer, especially when you're driving.
That's a great feature.
And they're using Gemini in Google Earth, too.
Oh, wow.
For some really interesting city planning projects.
Like what?
Well, for example, it can help figure out the best places to put EV charging stations.
Okay.
By looking at where existing chargers are, the density of businesses nearby, and population distribution.
So it's like using AI to make cities smarter.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
And AI is also making public transit info way better.
Okay, how so?
Well, it can give you real-time updates on delays, suggest alternate routes if there are disruptions, and even tell you exactly where the entrance to a subway station is.
So you're not wandering around lost.
Right.
I've definitely done that before.
And for regular navigation, AI can give you real-time alerts about weather-related hazards.
Okay.
Like unplowed roads, flooded areas, low visibility, that kind of thing.
That could be a lifesaver in some situations.
It definitely could, especially during bad weather.
Yeah, for sure.
And they've even added a new feature called the arrival experience.
Arrival experience?
Yeah, it helps you find parking spots.
Okay.
And then gives you those last-mile walking directions to your final destination.
So it gets you right to the door.
Exactly.
It's really awesome.
It's like they've thought of everything.
It really is a super helpful tool.
It is.
But now let's get into something that's always a concern when we're talking about services that handle this much data.
Yeah.
Data privacy.
That's a big one.
It is, because Google knows so much about where we go and what we do.
Right.
So what are they doing to protect our privacy?
Well, they've implemented a bunch of safeguards over the years.
Okay.
One of the biggest ones is that they automatically blur faces and license plates in Street View images.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
That's become pretty standard now.
Right.
But it was a huge step forward when they first started doing it.
Yeah, because it helps to protect people's anonymity.
Exactly.
And users have a lot more control over their location history now too, right?
Yes, definitely. You can turn off location history completely.
Okay.
Delete specific records of places you've been.
Uh-huh.
And for sensitive locations like healthcare facilities, that data is often deleted automatically.
Oh, that's good.
And in a really big move towards privacy, they've also started keeping location history data primarily on the user's device itself.
So it's not stored in the cloud anymore?
Not necessarily all of it.
Okay.
A lot of it is stored on your phone or tablet instead of being linked to your Google account in the cloud.
Okay. So it's harder for someone to access that data.
Exactly. It's a much more privacy-conscious approach.
Yeah, that's great.
And you can also request to have certain areas blurred in Street View images.
Oh, like your house or something?
Yeah, if you want extra privacy around your property.
That makes sense.
But, you know, all this data they collect also has a really positive side.
Oh, right.
It allows them to give those real-time hazard warnings.
Yeah.
Like if there's flooding on a road or something.
Yeah, that could be really important.
It could definitely help people avoid dangerous situations.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
It is.
You know, the data that makes these features so useful also raises privacy concerns.
A tough balance to strike.
For sure. And what about Waze?
Oh, yeah. Waze.
You know, with all the user-reported incidents
Right.
that contribute to real-time alerts and alternate routes.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool system.
It is. It's like a community effort to make navigation better.
But haven't there been issues with those alternate routes?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes those alternate routes end up directing a ton of traffic through quiet residential neighborhoods.
Right. I've heard about that.
It can be a real problem for those communities.
Yeah, it's not fair to them.
And Google's stance on this is that they're basically just routing people along public roads.
Okay.
And they say they work with local authorities to make sure they're following traffic regulations.
Uh-huh.
But the more we all rely on these navigation apps, the bigger this issue becomes.
Right.
It's like we need to figure out a way to optimize traffic flow, not just for individuals, but for entire communities.
Yeah, like finding a balance between personal convenience and the greater good.
Exactly.
It's a tough problem to solve.
It is. And it's not just about inconvenience either.
Oh.
There have been some really tragic cases where these apps have given bad directions.
Really?
Yeah, like back in 2022, there was this case in North Carolina where a driver died after Google Maps allegedly routed him over a bridge that had collapsed.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a terrible accident, and the family ended up suing Google.
That's so sad.
It really highlights how important accurate map data is.
Yeah, because people are trusting these apps with their lives.
Absolutely.
And mapping internationally has its own set of challenges, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because not every place is as well mapped as like the US or Europe.
Right. And there was this case with Grab. Yeah, the ride-hailing company in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
They ended up having to create their own maps for Jakarta, Indonesia.
Really?
Because the existing maps just weren't accurate enough.
Wow. So even a huge company like Google doesn't have everything perfectly mapped out.
Not yet.
It's a pretty daunting task.
It is. It's like trying to map the entire world, which is basically what they're doing.
Yeah, and not just the easy parts.
Exactly. They have to map everywhere, even places that aren't commercially viable.
Right.
But the good news is that all these advancements in camera technology are helping. Those smaller, more portable cameras we talked about earlier, they're making it much easier to map all kinds of different locations.
So hopefully that means the maps will be more accurate and up-to-date all over the world.
That's the goal.
Okay, so let's switch gears now and talk about the business side of Google Maps.
Right.
Because it's a free service for us.
Yeah.
So how does Google actually make money from it?
Right.
It's interesting because Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, they don't break out the financials for Google Maps specifically.
Oh, so we don't know exactly how much money it makes?
Right, it's all lumped in with their other services.
Okay.
But there is this report from Morgan Stanley back in 2019.
Okay.
That estimated Google Maps would bring in something like $3 billion in revenue in 2019.
$3 billion.
Yeah. And they projected that to grow to $11 billion by 2023.
Wow. That's a huge jump.
It is. And that would make it a pretty significant chunk of the overall navigation app market.
Yeah, for sure.
So how are they making all this money?
Well, the biggest source of revenue is advertising.
Advertising.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you search for a local business, like a restaurant or a store, advertisers can pay to have their listings show up higher in the results.
Ah, so that's why some businesses are at the top of the list.
Yeah. And sometimes they'll have a little ad icon next to their name.
Right.
But the idea is that these ads should blend in naturally.
Okay. So it's not like super intrusive banner ads or anything?
No, it's more subtle than that.
Okay.
They might just give those sponsored listings a slightly more prominent position. Or maybe show their logo on the map as a point of interest.
So it's not like it's screaming advertisement at you.
Right. It's supposed to feel more integrated.
That makes sense.
And another big way they make money is by selling access to their super detailed map data through their Maps platform.
Maps platform.
Yeah.
Okay.
So companies in all sorts of industries use this.
Like who?
Well, a good example is solar energy companies.
Oh, yeah.
They use Google's rooftop imagery and measurements to figure out who might be good customers for their solar panels.
So they can see if your roof is the right size and shape and stuff?
Exactly.
That's pretty clever.
And Google has this data for hundreds of millions of buildings in tons of different countries.
Oh, that's a lot of roofs.
It is. It's an incredibly valuable data set.
I bet.
And they also let developers use the Maps platform to integrate Google Maps into their own websites and apps.
Oh, okay. So that's how like Wayfair shows property listings on a map.
Yeah.
And Domino's tracks their deliveries.
Exactly. There are literally millions of websites and apps using Google Maps this way.
That's a huge part of their business then.
It is. And it's not just small companies either.
Oh.
Uber was reportedly paying Google $58 million over 3 years for access to their mapping tech.
$58 million.
Yeah. It's a big deal for them.
Wow.
And Google's also getting into the car industry itself.
Oh, so.
With their Android Automotive operating system.
Android Automotive.
Yeah, it's basically Android for cars.
Okay.
And it includes Google Maps, of course.
That makes sense.
And a bunch of car companies are starting to use it in their infotainment systems.
Like who?
Polestar, Volvo, Honda, GM, Ford, a whole bunch of them.
Wow. So Google Maps is going to be built into a lot of cars.
It looks like it.
And having accurate maps is super important for those systems.
Absolutely.
Especially for things like displaying speed limits and giving lane guidance.
If those things are wrong, it can be really dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's the whole future of self-driving cars,
right,
which rely heavily on accurate maps.
Oh, yeah. They basically need a perfect understanding of the world to work properly.
Exactly. And Alphabet has their own self-driving car company called Waymo. And they're already doing really well in the robotaxi market.
Yeah, they're leading the way in a lot of cities.
And in Phoenix, you can actually hail a Waymo car directly through the Google Maps app.
That's so cool.
It is. It's like the future is already here.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe someday these self-driving cars will actually help to create the maps themselves.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Right.
Because they're constantly sensing their environment.
Yeah.
So they could provide a stream of super up-to-date map data.
That would be amazing.
It would. Mm-hmm. But as of right now, Google hasn't announced any plans to have totally driverless cars specifically for mapping.
Okay.
But it's definitely something that could happen in the future.
It's pretty exciting to think about.
It is.
So to sum it all up, Google Maps has come a long way.
It really has.
From that simple idea with a camera strapped to a car to this massive global AI-powered platform.
It's a pretty incredible evolution.
Yeah, and they're constantly updating it with tons of data from all these different sources.
It's really mind-boggling when you think about the scale of it all.
It is, and it makes you wonder about our reliance on these digital maps.
Yeah.
You know, we're so used to navigating the world through our phones now.
Right.
It's definitely super convenient.
It is.
But has it changed our relationship with our surroundings?
That's a good question.
Like, do we even pay attention to landmarks and street names anymore?
Maybe not as much as we used to.
Yeah, something to think about.
It definitely, it's like we're trading off some of our natural navigational skills for the convenience of these digital tools.
It's a fascinating dilemma.
It is.
And it really makes you appreciate the complexity of something we use every day without even thinking about it.
Absolutely. Google Maps is a true marvel of modern technology.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the world of Google Maps.
It was my pleasure.
I hope you learned something new and maybe even started thinking about maps in a whole new way.
Me too. It's been a really insightful conversation.
All right. Until next time, happy navigating.
Happy navigating.
Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. For more detail, you can visit our blog website www.evergreentechtips.com.